Hey everybody, I apologize for my gaffe. I was so engrossed in Dusty's story, which is so interesting and so detailed, that I forgot to give away the tickets Denise gave me for the McCoy House fundraiser that is on October the 20th at 6 p.m. at Dooling Hall. So here's the thing. I intended to do this during the middle of the podcast and just completely forgot. So the first person to reach out to Denise gets the 2 free tickets. She gave me authority and permission to give out her cell phone number, so y'all call her or text her 601-940-3411. It should be a pretty awesome time. They've got some music, a silent auction, food, a coffee and tea bar. So again, Denise's number is 601-940-3411. Sorry about that. All right, everybody, we are back for podcast number, I think this is number 9. Let me look on my computer. No, yes, number 9. Again, this is Drew Hassan from local Jackson area in recovery. This is the Recovery Lab podcast. Again, my general spiel in the beginning is the same. If y'all want to comment, please comment. I appreciate the constructive criticism. Give me suggested topics, suggest or nominate people to be on the podcast. If you have some helpful information for people in recovery, post that in the comments. The general example I always give is I saw where the Pines was giving away Narcan. Comment that kind of stuff. We are, I lost my spot. The same as always, the beginning. If you want to support the podcast, I'm certainly here to help it. Oh, this is a new thing that we're going to have today. So the McCoy House sober living system for women is having its country and blues rock for recovery. They're going to have some music, a silent auction. I saw on Facebook they're giving away auctioning off some pretty cool stuff like a day at the spa at Aqua, some locally made pottery that was pretty cool looking, and just general items that everybody should go and bid on and support the McCoy House. It is on October the 20th at 6 p.m. There's going to be, like I said, the silent auction, food, coffee, tea, a coffee and tea bar. As you can imagine, they won't have alcohol, but they will make up for it with camaraderie and food. So, and general sobriety that we all benefit from. So I've got 2 tickets that Denise Marsters has so graciously given me to give away. So a little bit later on, not too much longer, I'm going to tell you how you can try to get the 2 free tickets, because it'll be awesome. All right, so without further ado, Dusti Yarbrough has so graciously given of her time today. I welcome Dusti to the podcast.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good, doing good.
Feeling good?
Yeah.
Don't be nervous.
I'm nervous.
Okay. You'll get through it. All right, so like I talked about before I hit the record button, I've got some general questions,
Okay.
but it's really an opportunity for you to tell your story. I see your life as you live it on Facebook, and you've got everything going for you. Going to school, got a cute baby that even though I've never laid eyes on him, I feel like he's kind of a part of my life. I enjoy looking to see what milestones Bash accomplishes, and
Yeah.
what he says to you when he wants food, and
Yeah.
what he says to you when he doesn't. And I just thought that your life looked like somebody's life who the promises were coming true for them.
For sure.
And it would be selfish of you not to share that with other people who could maybe benefit. So, in keeping with the outline that I've got over here, how did your addiction begin?
So when I was 12, it was my cousin Kayla's birthday. It was her 14th birthday. And we asked her mom for a joint. And she was like, sure. So that was the first time I ever got high. And after that, I started smoking weed pretty regular, and that's where it started. By 13, my mom let me try some meth. By 14 or 15, I tried some powder cocaine, and it was like,
Damn, how would you have even known to ask for that? I mean, did you see it growing up?
yeah, sure. My parents were both addicts. In the beginning, my mom messed around with like meth and ecstasy, but after she met my stepdad, it was meth pretty heavy, and eventually it got to the point where they didn't hide their IV use anymore. They just did it right in front of us, you know. But around when I was like 13 or 14, OxyContin was getting real big. And my mom was a nurse, so she would write prescriptions. Like, they stole their doctor's prescription pad and she would write them. So she wrote everybody that we know a prescription, especially if they had Medicaid, because you could pay $3 and get it. And if I went in the pharmacy to pick up the medicine, she would give me half. And so I'm like 14 with all these pills, and I ended up making connections with some of her friends that I knew took them, and so I started selling the pills that way. And that's in doing that, I came in contact with cocaine and stuff like that. And the first time I did cocaine, it was like my brain was like, this is what you've been missing your whole life. And
How old were you?
I was 14 or 15. I think I was 15. And when I was 17, I did the cocaine for a couple years there. And like I said, my mom was a nurse and I was doing some private attendant work. We would tell the people that I was 18, but I really wasn't. I was like 17. And I was doing some private attendant work, and I got
What is private attendant work?
like sitting in-house with elderly.
I got you.
And, you know, you do like some, I didn't sit with, I sat with like a lady that had Alzheimer's, and she just needed help cooking and cleaning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I woke up one morning and I had started dating this guy that could get me the cocaine anytime I wanted it, you know. Well, he couldn't get me any that day. And I was like, I couldn't do anything. Yeah, I mean, like, I couldn't function without it. And that's when I knew that I had crossed this line of, like, being like my parents. Because I always thought, oh, I'll never be like them. You know, they're, like, totally controlled by this. But I knew at that point that I had crossed that line.
And you're approximately 17 or 18?
Yeah, 17. And then that's the first time I went to detox. Because I was like, this is out of control. But I decided, I was cured after 7 days of detox, of course.
Magic.
Yeah, magic. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. But I could still drink.
Of course.
Because I was definitely not an alcoholic. I never even cared about alcohol, you know. So I got out and I just went full-blown alcoholic for the next year.
Where is there? Are you from Jackson?
I'm from Laurel.
Laurel, okay.
Yeah, and I went to Pine Grove for my first detox.
Yeah.
They let me I was actually underage, but they put me in the adult, because I was like, I'm not going to detox with a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds. You know, there's no way. So I got out, and when I started with alcohol, it wasn't like I'm going to sip a little bit and get a buzz. It was like, I'm going to drink straight vodka as much as I can, as fast as I can, and blackout is my goal.
Hammer down.
Yeah. Like, I didn't even understand, like, drinking a couple beers. Like, why would you even do that, you know?
What's the point?
Yeah, and, so I did that for a couple years. Well, probably about a year, and then I ended up having to move back in with my parents. And at this point, they were like shooting up nonstop all day, every day. You know, like my little sister, it's like they didn't care. Like, I don't think they would have noticed if she even didn't get off the bus, you know? And it was driving me insane because it was like I had started snorting the Oxycontin along with the alcohol. But I thought that was okay because I'd never really had a problem with that either, the pills. And every day my stepdad would come home and he'd go in the bathroom and he'd fix a shot, but he'd leave it in there. He wouldn't do it right away because then my mom would know that he had had some drugs without her, you know. And I knew that he did this because I could tell. I'd seen him do it 100 times. And I knew where they kept the syringes, so I went, and I was sure that I couldn't do as much as he did, you know, because he had been doing it for a long time. So I got a little bit out of his, and I did it. And I did it successfully for like a week. Just every day when he would come in and do that, I would go steal some of it and put water back in there. And then I missed for the first time.
Mm-mm.
And I went to my mom crying, and I didn't know. I mean, like, I had bruised up my arms. They were, like, covered in bruises. And my mom just, like, cried and cried. And I was like, please do this shot for me, you know. And she eventually did. But I'll never forget, like, she just cried and cried. She's like, I never wanted this for you. You know, and I didn't
How old
even
were you at
get
this
it.
time?
18.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Look, I'm riveted here. All right.
Oh, yeah.
What happened next?
So then a friend of mine said, hey, I've got some cocaine. Do you want to come over? I'm like, sure. Well, I hadn't did the cocaine IV yet.
Uh-oh.
And so this is my first time, and I was like blown away. It was, I guess I was 19 at that time. And just within like a period of a week, I went from like being okay to doing whatever, however, whenever to get my next shot of cocaine. Like, it was awful. Like, it was so fast. And so I decided I needed to go back to rehab. So this time I went to Clearview for 30 days. Wait, maybe I did 60 that first time. I think that might have been when I did 60 days because I was like, you know, this shit's scary. This is worse than it's ever been. Like, I gotta really do something. And in my mind, it was like, now that I have the knowledge that I have a disease, like, I'm never going to do that again.
Of course not.
No. Yeah, like, I know. Well, I met this guy at rehab.
Isn't it always some guy?
It's always some guy.
It's always some
I've
girl
done it
for
twice.
us.
Yeah, I've done it twice. And so, ended up going to stay with him. And we didn't use like the first couple weeks.
Did y'all meet at Clearview?
Yeah, we met
Yeah.
at Clearview. He got out after I did. He was coming in. He came in at the end of my stay, and so, yeah, and it was terrible. It was just within a little while we were both back using. I got back into the pills, back shooting up. I was hiding the shoot. He didn't shoot up. He just did meth. And I was hiding the shooting up from him, and eventually it didn't work out. I found out he was sleeping with his friend Kyle.
Oh no.
Yeah. So
Kyle's a guy?
yeah, Kyle's a guy, and it would have been fine if I had known that about him from the beginning, but I did not, and so it was quite a shock. So yeah, that didn't work out. I went right back to, you know, just going crazy using.
Yeah,
I said
you
I'll
can't
never
compete with
shoot up
Kyle.
cocaine again though. yeah, you stay with Kyle. Yeah, so I didn't do cocaine for a really long time. Like I could probably count on two hands from the age of 20 to when I stopped at 29. You know, like not very many times in between there did I touch cocaine because I was like, that stuff takes me too far too quick, you know. At 20, I had gone to this bar that only served beer. It was like a a dive
Boring
bar.
bar.
Yeah, it was like a little dive bar, but it was like Sunday, I guess, or I don't know. It was some day, and they would serve me even though I wasn't 21 yet. So I just went. I'm like down in beers. I meet this guy that I had known from years ago. We get together. I decide I'm gonna drink and do Xanax because this combination will work, you know. So that's what I'm doing. I end up going to the doctor and they're like, you may have cervical cancer. And
Oh, no.
yeah, because I had some, what's it called? Endometriosis and stuff like that, and cysts on my ovaries like throughout the years or whatever, but they tell me I might have the cervical cancer. And I never wanted kids up until they told me this might affect my ability to have kids.
How old are you now?
I'm 20. I'm dating this guy that I met at the dive bar.
Right.
Okay. And I go home and I tell him, and he's like, well, let's get married and have a baby. Okay, let's do it. Well, we start trying to have the baby right away. We don't
Right.
get married first. And 2 weeks later, I find out that he's already married to someone. Like, she contacts me and she's like, I just want you to know that he's legally married to me still. And I'm like, oh my God. So I leave him. Well, about 2 weeks, probably about 3 or 4 weeks after that, I'm at the fair with my mom and my family, and I get off a ride that should not make me sick, but I'm sick.
Oh.
And it lasts for like 3 days, and I told my mom, I was like, when am I ever going to get over this stomach bug? And she said 9 months from now. And I was like, what? So, I was pregnant with my first daughter. I used throughout that whole pregnancy. But I didn't, the way that I justified it was I didn't do any meth, I didn't drink, I didn't really do pills. All I did was shoot up OxyContin. and my sister-in-law had told me that people who are on opioids, when they get pregnant, the doctor usually tells them that they should stay on it and not suddenly stop. So I was like, okay, good. But I still had this tremendous amount of guilt from it, and I would pray, I mean, literally probably almost every day, that she wouldn't be affected by my decisions to keep using, that she would have my feet because her daddy's feet were awful, and that I wouldn't have stretch marks. And literally all of that happened. But at the end of the pregnancy, 2 weeks before she was born, I stopped shooting up the OxyContin, and I would take a few Percocet here and there, like to kind of taper down.
Yeah.
And so, and right before each doctor visit, I would maybe take a Soma here or there, like so that the OxyContin wasn't in my system when I peed for them. So DHS was never involved. They never knew, that I was an addict. And she was completely healthy, not addicted to anything, like only by the grace of God.
Amen.
I mean, like, only. And I maintained for probably about a year after I had her. Like, I was still shooting up OxyContin, but I was working like 40 to 60 hours a week at this curb store that sold food, like in the deli or whatever. I was working out there. I had moved to Alabama with my grandma and my aunt, and they were keeping the baby while I worked, and I was just, it was a good
Holding
time.
it down.
Yeah, I was holding it down. I had something to kind of keep me going or whatever, and I decided I didn't like it over there anymore, and I moved back to Laurel, and that's where all the problems really started. I got back on meth. I met this guy. It wasn't long. My aunt would take Isabella for like 3 or 4 days at a time, and then I could go wild, during that time, do whatever. And then it got to be like 7 days, and then it got to be like 10 days one time, and finally I had moved back to my grandfather's property. My grandfather is a pedophile, was a pedophile. He had molested my aunt and my mom, and then they sent me and my cousin with him when we were like 3 to 6, and he molested us as well. So when I moved back to his property, my aunt said, no, Isabella will not be anywhere around him. And I mean, I can sit here all day and I can tell you, I never let him around Isabella. She was very small at the time, but I can't in my heart say that I wouldn't have gotten messed up and him come in, and done something. I used to like to say, well, I never let him around her. It would never have happened. But, like, in truth, looking back, I don't know what could have happened. It was God took her out of that situation, through my aunt, so that didn't happen to her. Thank God.
Thank God.
Yeah. And whenever she went, it was like there was absolutely no reason to maintain anything, so it was just crazy. I went crazy for about 2 or 3 months, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore. I want my baby back, and so I went back to Clearview. A couple weeks in, I call home, and Krista at this time, my little sister, is 13, or she may have been 14, but I'm thinking 13.
And how old are you?
I'm 8 years older than her.
Okay.
Oh, so yeah, so I'm.
You're 22, 23?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so, I call home, Krista answers the phone, and she is so messed up. My stepdad let her shoot up for the first time at 13 years old.
Mm.
And I was like, y'all, I hated that because I thought maybe she'll make it out. Like I had such high hopes that she wouldn't end up like us because I had already.
How was your mom and stepdad continuing to do this for so long?
Oh my God, I don't know how they made it as long as they did. But while I'm at Clearview, I call home. Krista is so fucked up, and I get my mom on the phone, and I'm just like cussing her out. Y'all are sorry. I was like, she doesn't know limits or anything. She's going to die. And I talked to her one time the next morning because I was mad because they hadn't brought my cigarettes up to the rehab. And so the next time I talked to her, I said, did y'all bring my cigarettes? She said, yeah, they're up there. And that was it. Well, the next day, I'm sitting in my small group, and my therapist comes and pulls me out and brings me to the office, and it's my aunt and uncle that are going through a divorce, so it's weird that they're there together, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on? And my immediate thought was, Isabella, something's happened to the baby. And they're like, no. And I'm like, Mama, because, she's older. That was the next logical choice. And they're like, no, it's your mom. And my mom had died.
Oh.
Yeah, she overdosed
Oh.
that night, and it's like my mom was a terrible example, but it was like just me and her for the first 6 years of my life. She was 16 when she had me, so it's like we grew up together, she took my side with my stepdad every time. It caused a lot of problems between me and my stepdad, and literally, I had just got finished telling my small group that I thought my purpose in life was to take care of my parents. Because that's all I'd ever, it was like, it felt like that's all I'd ever done. Took care of their stuff because they were so fucked up they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, literally, in that moment, I felt like my purpose for living had just died. What would I do? I out loud to everyone around me, I said, well, thank God that I'm in this place and that this happened now when I got a straight head, and I said all this stuff. And I was like, but I'm going to need to leave and go make some pictures for her funeral. And they're like, okay. But in my mind, I knew the second I get away from y'all,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting high.
It's on.
Yeah. the second. And so that's basically what I did. I went back to my psychiatrist, got on all my pills, drank. I mean, I was blacking out. At the funeral, I was so messed up that I was arranging flowers while the preacher was
Preaching.
while he was preaching. I jumped on some lady that I don't even know. She's like a friend of the family. I don't even.
Like to whoop her?
Yeah, like I was gonna beat her up. I don't know what she did or like, and I didn't even remember any of it. She told me about it years later, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. But after that, for the next 2 years, they at that time they were taking OxyContin off the market, or it had just been taken away, and it was like Roxy's and stuff like that. But for the next 2 years, the guy that I had started dating right before Isabella got taken did a lot of meth. And so since it was easier to get, that's what I got on. And I literally did so much meth that it flipped some sort of switch in my brain. And as soon as I hit it, you were trying to kill me, and I needed to get away from you. Whoever I was around. Like, there was no explanation as to why.
I feel you.
Yeah, it was terrible. I called the ambulance on myself like 8 times and told them I was hallucinating on crystal meth and I needed them to come get me. Like, the hospital hated me. Those nurses hated me. When they saw me coming, they were so awful. But I mean, I get it, because it's like, what is this crazy, like she's using an ambulance for nothing. She's taking up our time when there's people who actually need help, but it was terrible. But
All right, so you're you're like 22 or 23.
Yeah.
Your mom's just died. You're wilding out.
Wilding out.
Then what happens?
Let's see. I wilded out for a couple years. I ended up getting a felony shoplifting charge with my grandma in Lamar County, because we would go together and shoplift, and it's a long story, but I ended up getting another. I had gotten the day of Mama's funeral, I had money to buy clothes for the funeral, but I was going to steal them because I was messed up. And so I got my third misdemeanor in Jones County, which makes a felony.
Mm-hmm.
So I was about to have to be put on pretrial diversion, and I was like, I went to the district attorney who had coached my little brother's soccer team at one point in time, and I was like, I'll never pass the first drug test. There's no point in even putting me on this, and he's like, well, we'll try to help you find somewhere to get in, and they suggested Jacob's Well. So I went to Jacob's Well. I was there for 6 months. I wanted to leave at about 3 months, and they were like, they told me that if I tried to leave, I was going to jail. And so basically that's why I stayed. It wasn't because I was just still really wanting to get help. I just did not want to go to jail. The day I got out, I went to the district attorney's office, and when I walked in, like, I had to remind the guy who I was. I had seen him a bunch of times, and he was like, oh my God, because I went from being like a size 0 to like a size 9. Like, I looked so healthy compared to what they had seen me. And they ended up dropping the charges within like a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I ended up using within like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I tried to go stay in Alabama with my daughter, and it was I didn't want to be out there. I always went home to my parents, and I always ended up using. Or I'd be at my grandma's, and my grandma's got an ungodly amount of pills, and she sold the majority of them. So, and I would steal from her all the time, But about 6 months later, I guess it's like 2012, 2013, the beginning of 2013. No, 2012, I get pregnant with my son, my middle son. He's been adopted, so I don't have any contact with him at this point. But I used even worse through that pregnancy. Like, I did quite a few things. You know, I did some cocaine, and I think I did meth one time. Opiates, shooting up opiates. But I had also, by this point, found heroin, which it hadn't like totally taken over yet, but it was kind of like an option if I didn't have Roxy's.
Right.
And so, within almost to his first birthday, I had gotten so bad on the heroin after he was born. It got more and more. I got so bad on it that I was like, I got to go back to rehab. You know, I got to do something different. And I said to his family, you know, will you take him until...
The father's family?
Yeah, the father's family. And both of the dads of both my first two children were crap. They both wanted to deny that they were the dad, which is crazy. I was like, do you think that if I had other options for the dad that I would choose you? Yeah, like, this is terrible. But so his family took the baby, and I got to detox at South Central in Laurel, and I made my first phone call to check on him, and they wouldn't take my phone calls. And I found out pretty quickly that she was already in the process of, she had an attorney trying to adopt him. Like, apparently she had wanted more kids and couldn't have them. So it was like, when Tristan came along, they were like, oh, this is perfect, you know. But she ended up getting pregnant later, which is
This is your
news.
Tristan's father's mother?
Tristan's father's sister.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, when I found that out, it was like, instead of being like, well, I'm going to dig in and do this, I was like, well, there's no point in any of this, you know. Like, what am I even doing? So I went back out for a couple years. In 2015, I took a road trip with a couple guys that I know to go to Arkansas to pick up some pills, and we're coming back through Florence, and we get pulled over, and I told him, I said, give me the meth pipe, you know, and I'll hide it. And he's like, no, it's hidden, it's fine. I'm like, okay. Well, they get us out of the car, they're searching the car. The guy walks, the gentlemen that I was with are older, and they're like the sons of doctors, of a doctor, and at this point, I've got like a mini skirt on, and I look pretty trashy compared to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the cop immediately just walks back to me and opens it, and there's the meth, and there's the pipe, and he looks at me, and I'm like, where'd you find that? And he's like, under the passenger seat. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, it was so well hidden, thank you. But, so we all go to jail. I ended up staying 7 months in Rankin County Jail in the felony pod, and I was on the work crew. They came to me and they said, if you'll sign these papers, you can stay for 18 months and your charge will be gone. I said, I'm not signing the papers because there were 3 people in that car, and that stuff was nowhere near me. You know, so I ended up, 2 days after telling them no, I wouldn't sign the papers, they told me to get my stuff. I was headed out. Well, the shoplifting charge with Grandma
Came
had caught back up with me, and they moved me to Lamar County. I spend a couple months down there, and then I go before a judge, and he's like, what happened? He said, you were on pretrial diversion, you messed that up. You were on probation, you messed that up. And I'm like, sir, I keep relapsing. And he's like, oh, you're on drugs, that's why you were stealing. And I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, well, you need to be on drug court. And at the time, my sister had been put on drug court as
Your
well.
little sister?
Yeah.
Is that the only sister you have?
No, I have. My dad has 7 kids, so
Oh.
I got 3 sisters and 3 brothers by my dad, and then but Krista is the only one with my mom, and then I have a stepbrother and a stepsister, which were they ended up living with their family because of how my parents were. So yeah, they put me on drug court. I went to stay with Krista, and just within a little while, Krista was breaking it down for me what we can take, what's going to be out of our system in 6 hours, what'll be out of our system in 24 hours, you know, how to get around the test.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is, my addiction takes over. I can't wait that 24 hours. You know, after a while. I did it a couple of times and passed a couple drug tests, but after a while it takes back over, and there's, you know, no way. So I stopped checking in with drug court. I found myself at this guy's house on the floor digging for a vein, and I said to myself, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And the judge had told me I had 1 shot, so I fully believed that if I called my drug court lady, I was going to prison. But it literally would have been better than what I was doing, even if it was prison. So I called her, and she's like, I'm going to put you in jail until you detox, and then I'm going to put you in Whitfield. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I thought I was going to prison.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what she did. And on the way up there, she was like, have you thought about any kind of long-term treatment after this? And I'm like, oh no. You know, 45 days, that'll do it. It'll be fine. And about halfway in, I decided there's no way I'm ever going to do it unless I get some long-term help. Because I've been doing it so long, you know, that I had never had to, my family had always supported me, like, with bills or a place to stay, or, you know, for the last couple of years I've been living house to house, but I had never lived a real life. So I tried to get in. I had this roommate at Whitfield who was so weird. She was going to Grace House. So I tried to get in everywhere but Grace House because I did not want to take the chance of having to be roommates with her yet again. She was crazy. And nowhere would take me except Grace House. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do it.
Is this like 2015, 2016?
This is, 2016. Yeah. At the beginning of 2016. And so I got to Grace House. I'm doing really well. And by this time, my stepdad has also died.
Oh.
Yeah. So my mom, my stepdad, then my grandfather, who took care of me, gave me whatever I wanted whenever I asked. You know, that's why I've been living house to house the last couple of years before this, because Grandpa's not there anymore to give me what I want. So, I'm at Grace House. I've been there about a month. So I did my 45 days in Whitfield, and then I've done like a month at Grace House, and my grandma dies. And whenever I come home for the funeral, I get high.
Mm.
Well, I called Grace House. I called Alice Morgan. She was over at Grace House at that time, and I told her what had happened, and she said, get your butt home now.
Back to Grace House.
Yeah. And it touched me because it had been quite a few years since I had a home or anyone to care if I came home. So when she told me that, I made a decision, when I go back, I'm going to do this. You know, I had been, up until that point, being at Grace House, I had been like doing a checklist. You know, like, okay, meeting, check. Got a sponsor, check. Call once a week, you know, my sponsor, check. You know, but I wasn't really in it. So when I came back, my sponsor fired me. She said, but my friend Hope here will sponsor you. And Hope was just a good old alcoholic. She had never done heroin. She had never done the things that I did to get the heroin.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little worried about a 4th step with her. But I told God, and I wasn't sure that this program was going to work. I wasn't. I had done everything else, so I might as well try it. And I knew the only way it would work is if God did something to help me, So I said, all right, God, I'm going to do it. And you're just going to have to show me. Because I don't have a lot of faith right now. And I did. I started working the steps with my sponsor. And I slacked around. I mean, it took me 6 weeks to do a 4th step. And it shouldn't have. It definitely shouldn't have. But by step 7, I was the type of person, I did not have friends. I did not truly care about anyone. I mean, that's really including my children. Like I only cared about you if you could do something for me.
Right.
I had no true friends. And so at step 7, I'm at work one day, and me and the cook get into it. I'm a server, and I say some hateful shit, and then I walk off, and the first thought that comes into my mind is, you really shouldn't have said that to him. And I'm like, where did that come from? Because the things I said were true, but and I always thought, if you're telling the truth, it doesn't matter how you say it or what you say, because you're telling the truth. But that's not true. You're not supposed to be like that. And so I called my sponsor, immediately, and I told her what happened, and she's like, yeah, this is your character defects, and this is God giving you a chance to work on them, and now you have to make an amends to that guy. And I'm like, oh my God, because I did not want to make an amends to that guy. But, I went ahead and did it, and that's when I knew something's working.
I'm growing, yeah.
Yeah, something's happening. God's doing something, because that was not me. Because I wouldn't have cared if I talked to that guy that way.
All right, so you're at Grace House working, slinging burgers and fries and milkshakes.
Yeah. And I ended up staying at Grace House for 2 years. This little apartment in the same trailer park where Alice stayed became available. Little 1-bedroom apartment. I was like, that's perfect. It's like $450. I was like, yeah, that's great. So I had everything lined up to leave Grace House, and 2 days before, I thought to myself, my period has not started. So I go get a pregnancy test. I'm pregnant. Me and Sebastian's dad were not together. We were more like friends. So it was very scary. I eventually told him a couple days later, and at first it was unsure. I was unsure if what he was going to do. Is he going to flake out? What, is he going to, I think he needed some time for it to register. Yeah. And so 2 days before I move out, now I'm pregnant. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so the next, and by this time I'm year 2 of my sobriety, and literally from year 2 to 3 was the hardest time. If I hadn't been pregnant, I probably would have relapsed. It was so difficult, financially, having to save up to take off time with the baby, because servers don't get paid maternity leave.
Right.
Right before I had Sebastian, I ended up taking a job with Grace House as a driver, and then, they knew that I was about to have the baby, and I was going to have time off and all that. Well, the director at Grace House Incorporated, not Alice, but she calls me and says, we're going to do paid maternity leave for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, what a blessing. So, because I'd barely been scraping up saving. So God showed up and had paid maternity leave. I didn't have any problems.
Amen.
Yeah, it was great. One of my biggest things is I always make myself available. I said in the beginning, you know, if someone asks me to come speak somewhere, if someone asks me to be their sponsor, I'm going to try to do it if I can.
Or if somebody asks you to be on their podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter how nervous I am or...
Well, look, I feel like I know your son, and I have this emotional bond with him, even though I've really never laid eyes on him.
Yeah.
Because I followed your whole life on Facebook.
Yeah.
So tell everybody what it's like to be a mom again.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like having a second chance to, you know, do the things that I should have done first. And I never had, both of my kids were out of my care by 2 years old. So everything from 2 on is brand new stuff. Like I've never done any of this before. I've never done the potty training. You know, so everything with Bash is like for the first time. It's like being a parent for the first time because I never experienced any of it before. So it's crazy and it's funny. He's so funny. He's got his own little attitude.
Yeah, he seems like a pretty colorful kid from
Yeah.
what she posts on Facebook.
He is. He's amazing. I didn't realize that I needed him until I got him, and I was like, this, you know, like, my life is complete now. And so.
Where are you working now?
At Char.
The Char. And aren't you in school?
Yes, I am. I'm going to school for criminal justice. I want to work for drug court.
Well, that's coming full circle, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to be Dusty the Hammer, or are you going to be Dusty the compassionate one?
Probably a little bit of both. Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I come off as mean in the beginning to most people because I'm kind of like, I keep you at a distance until I get to know you a little bit and then I accept you. So I come off as a bitch at first. That's what most people tell me. And then after a while they're like, oh, she's
well, that is not the impression I got from you, and I think today's the first time I've met you face to face, or at least ever spoken to you.
Yeah.
Well, what else you want to talk about, if anything, or are you talked out?
I don't know.
Well, you did such a great job, like going through the beginning. I mean, I really felt like I was, you know, watching this movie of.
Good.
You know, I mean, you had the odds against you.
Yeah.
And then when everybody dies, and you know whatever support you did get from them, you know, leaves you out there on your own. And
Oh yeah.
now you're here to do it all by yourself.
And it may be bad to say, but I don't think that I would be where I'm at right now if my parents were still alive. I just don't, because that's always where I went back. You know, every single time. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm glad they're gone. But I'm just saying I think things would be different if they were still here.
You know, from the story you've told, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
You know, because we're going to have a bad day. And when that perfect storm rolls in,
Yeah.
you know, you're half broke, half mad,
Yeah.
half something else. And then, you know, it just takes a couple bad choices and then boom, you're back where you used to be.
Yeah.
But look at how your life has flourished. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
How much longer do you have in school?
I just started. So I'm only taking 2 classes right now because I was very afraid of math and I'm doing terrible in that class, so it's good that I only took 2 classes. But it's probably going to take about 3 years, I would think. It's supposed to be a 2-year.
Look, you got nothing but time.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. It's like, I mean, and I only work 15 to 25 hours a week at my job, and I make enough money to completely support myself and Sebastian. So I've got plenty of time to do school as well, and then sponsor and stuff like that.
Stay active in
Yeah.
recovery. Give
For
back.
sure. Yeah.
Be on podcasts.
Be on podcasts, yes.
Well, look, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come here. And I promise that there are women that will listen to your story and be better for it. I mean, I've sat over here and listened intently and thought of all the things that I can benefit from having heard your story.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to talk about before I turn the recorder off? I mean, I don't want you to feel like I'm running you off, but
No, that's pretty much it.
you feel like you got it all out?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.